Okay, so you've definitely heard the term space opera. It gets thrown around for everything from Star Wars to Dune. And you probably think, yeah, it's just sci-fi in space, right? But what is with that opera part? Does that mean it's supposed to be super dramatic and grand, or something else entirely? If you've ever been a little fuzzy on the name, you are not alone.
And yeah, you're really not alone in that thought. I love this quote, found it on a web forum, and it just perfectly captures how weird the name sounds. And hey, it's a fun idea, Klingon opera, anyone? But the real story behind where that name comes from, it has absolutely nothing to do with singing.
That's right. The term space opera wasn't originally a compliment. It wasn't coined to praise these huge epic stories. Nope. It was actually created to make fun of them, to dismiss them as cheap, unoriginal, and totally formulaic.
So to really get how we went from a term that was basically a put-down to a celebrated subgenre, we have to rewind. Let's go all the way back to the beginning when calling a story a space opera was pretty much fighting words.
To get why this was such a burn, you have to know the lingo of the time. The guy who coined the term, Wilson Tucker, was making a very specific comparison. See, back then, cheap formulaic westerns were called horse operas. And those cheesy melodramatic radio dramas, they were called soap operas. So when he called something a space opera, it was not a compliment. He was saying these stories were just tired old formulas with a shiny new coat of sci-fi paint.
And that's the real heart of the insult. It wasn't just that these stories were bad, it was that they were lazy. Critics were saying they had no new ideas, that they just swapped the American West for the final frontier. You know, just trade the cowboys for spacemen, the horses for starships, and the six-shooters for ray guns. And believe it or not, there's one character who perfectly embodies this whole critique.
Okay, let's talk about a guy named Bat Durston. Now, he's not a real character you'd find in a book. He was actually invented for an advertisement, specifically to make a very, very sharp point.
This slide just lays the whole argument out perfectly. Back in the 1950s, Galaxy magazine ran this ad, showing these two story openings that are, let's be honest, pretty much identical. But after showing this lazy swap, the ad dropped its punchline, and it was brutal. It basically said, if this is your idea of science fiction, you're welcome to it, but you'll never find it in Galaxy. I mean, wow. They were openly mocking the entire subgenre. And you know what? They kind of had a point. The early space operas were absolutely built on these tropes. You had the lone, rugged hero, a super clear line between the good guys and the bad guys, and the whole space setting was really just a new backdrop for a very old story structure. Same story, just a much, much bigger town to save.
But, and this is a big but, here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. Because what started out as an insult, a total cliché, eventually became this powerful stage for some of science fiction's biggest and most complex ideas. The genre actually grew up.
So a new generation of writers comes along, part of this movement they called the New Wave. And they looked at this massive canvas, entire galaxies, sprawling empires, and they didn't see a limitation. They saw an incredible opportunity. They realized that the epic scale of space opera was the perfect place to explore really complex social, political, and philosophical questions.
This timeline really maps out the whole journey. You can see how the genre went from being a joke in the 40s and 50s to being totally re-examined by this new generation in the 70s, and that led to what we now call new space opera, which is a respected and often really sophisticated form of storytelling.
So what exactly changed? I mean, how did we get from the simple story of Bad Durston to the incredibly complex universes we see today? Let's break down the key differences.
This table really says it all. Classic space opera, it was all about straightforward adventure, good versus evil. But new space opera, it's about asking tough questions about power, about society, about what it even means to be human. The characters evolved from your simple heroes into these complex figures, sometimes even post-human, beings who have been fundamentally changed by technology. And the whole philosophy shifted from just celebrating conquest to critically examining the very idea of empire.
When we think about that classic model, these are the heavy hitters. Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers are the absolute definition of the space cowboy, right? They're facing down evil emperors in stories where you always knew who the good guys were. They are the epitome of the Western in space.
And then, on the other side of the coin, you have the modern masters. Iain M. Banks' Culture series imagines this utopian society where tech has pretty much solved every problem. Ann Leckie's trilogy uses an artificial intelligence to explore consciousness and empire. And of course, Dune, a masterclass in politics, religion, and ecology on a galactic scale. See? These aren't just adventures. They're massive thought experiments.
So why did this happen? Why did this genre, which was once so maligned, evolve in such a profound way? Well, the answer taps into one of the most powerful ideas in human history.
At their core, both the old and the new space opera are stories about the frontier. And the frontier has always been this place, real or imagined, where we project our hopes, our fears, and all our big ideas about who we are and who we could become.
Way back in 1893, historian named Frederick Jackson Turner argued that the American West was more than just land. It was a process that literally shaped the nation's character. He saw the frontier as this place of transformation, a place that broke the bonds of custom and called for new institutions. That whole idea should sound really familiar.
Because it is the exact same spirit that launched 1,000 starships. Star Trek's mission statement is a direct echo of that frontier myth. It takes that same idea of exploration and transformation and just launches it into the cosmos. Space became the new West. And that, right there, is the ultimate redemption of space opera. It evolved way beyond being just a simple backdrop for adventure. It became the literary and imaginative space where we could explore our biggest questions about society, about technology, about our own identity, and our place in this vast universe. So the next time you see a starship jump to light speed, just remember the journey of the genre itself. It traveled all the way from a simple insult to become our modern mythology. It's the new frontier, and like all frontiers, it's really a reflection of our own hopes and fears. So the real question to leave you with is this: what is today's space opera telling us about our own future?